In the video today, we're answering a viewer question because Hailey O asks us, how did the tradition of having cakes with candles on them for birthdays start? Just before we get into the episode today, I do want to say that it's sponsored by Dashlane, a one-stop shop for all of your digital identity protection needs. You can get a 30-day free trial and after that get a 10% discount using our code TodayIFoundOut at dashlane.com/TodayIFoundOut. So for most of human history, ordinary people's birthdays weren't cause for much celebration. In fact, in the ancient world, if you weren't among the elite, odds are your birthday would have mostly just been noted for things like astrological purposes rather than throwing parties in your honor every year. One of the commonly cited first known instances of something like a birthday party being celebrated appeared in the book of Genesis, chapter 40, verses 20 to 22. And it came to pass the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the heads of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hands. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. However, according to Dr. James Hoffmeister of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, this birthday party was supposedly not celebrating the unnamed pharaoh's literal birthday, but rather his coronation, which marked his birth as a god. Whatever the case, candles and birthday cakes as we think of them were not a thing at this party, as far as we know. Probably wouldn't have worked out given that he had his baker hanged. As for slightly better documented history, we know from the Greek historian Herodotus that in the 5th century BCE, at least some Persians celebrated their birthdays, possibly even eating some form of sweetened cake due to their practice of eating an abundance of dessert. Of all of the days in the year, the one which they celebrate most is their birthday. It is customary to have the board furnished on that day with an ampler supply than common. The richer Persians cause an ox, a horse, a camel, and an ass to be baked whole and so served up to them. The poorer classes use instead the smaller kinds of cattle. They eat little solid food, but abundance of dessert, which is set on a table a few dishes at a time. This it is which makes them say that the Greeks, when they eat, leave off hungry, having nothing worth mention served up to them after the meats, whereas if they had more put before them, they would not stop eating. As for the ancient Greeks themselves, while not connected to a birthday, we do note they served some form of cake with candles to honor Artemis, the goddess who, among other things, had dominion over the moon. As such, people offered cakes that were not only shaped like said celestial object, but decorated with lit candles, presumably to make it glow. It has also been reported that the smoke of the candles perhaps was thought to help the goddess hear an individual's prayers as it ascends to the heavens. Like the Persians, the Romans, circa 2nd century BCE to the 5th century BCE, are known to have celebrated the birthdays of at least some commoners, although it doesn't appear that the custom was as ubiquitous as it is today. Rather, when a wealthy person reached a major milestone like 50, his family and friends might throw the individual in question a party and serve a special sweetened cake. Despite that the Romans had dipped candles made from tallow going all the way back to around the 5th century BCE, it does not appear that they put candles on their birthday cakes. The Chinese likewise have long had birthday celebrations, though eating cake on said day has only been an exceptionally recent phenomenon adopted from the Western world. Instead, in China, it is traditional to eat longevity noodles on one's birthday. During the Middle Ages in the Western world, beyond record-keeping not exactly being a priority at the time in this region, it appears birthdays and birthday cakes were not too prevalent in no small part because of early Catholic dogma that considered birthday celebrations to be pagan heresy. Things began to change on this front beginning around the 12th century when records of common births were again being meticulously noted. As babies were also honored with the name of a saint to protect them, people began celebrating their saint's day as opposed to their own birthday. As for reintroducing the birthday cake, this is seemingly thanks to German bakers starting around the 15th century. At this point, they began marketing single-layer cakes for birthdays, especially for one's first birthday. By the end of the 18th century, besides the Western world again starting to somewhat commonly celebrate birthdays, the Germans had evolved their birthday cake a bit, including the very wealthy sometimes ordering elaborate frosted birthday cakes, not that different from what we would have today. Pertinent to the topic at hand, the Germans were also now putting candles on the birthday cakes, as seen in their Kinderfest, children's festival, birthday parties. As to who came up with the idea of including these candles and why they put them there, this isn't clear, though it is known that at this point they were adding candles numbering at least the years that the child had been alive, plus often more in the hope of a long life to come. Thus, it has been speculated that the impetus for the candles was to represent the light of life. Other speculative claims state more pagan-like origins, such as that the candles were there to protect the child from evil spirits, and that the parties themselves were grouping together in hopes of fending off evil spirits, with the anniversary of one's birth supposedly marking a person becoming more vulnerable to said spirits. Whatever the case, the idea of putting candles on birthday cakes seems to have quickly spread beyond children's birthday parties. For instance, in 1746, Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf had a cake as large as any oven could be found to bake it, and holes made in the cake according to the years of the person's age, everyone having a candle stuck into it and one in the middle. A half-century later, in 1801, Prince August of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg was reported by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe of having on his 52nd birthday a generous-sized torch with colourful flaming candles, amounting to some 50 candles that began to melt and threatened to burn down, instead of there being enough room for the candles indicating upcoming years, as is the case with children's festivities of this kind. From here, this practice of ornate candled cakes for one's birthday spread throughout Europe, presumably initially with the elite of the continent copying one another, and it filtering down to those who could afford it from there. As for the United States, primarily for religious reasons, celebrating birthdays at all didn't become widely popular until the early 19th century. Notably, while Protestants were coming to embrace the idea of a birthday at this point, Catholics in the country still largely had religious issues with celebrating the anniversary of one's birth. It should also be reiterated that at this stage, having sweetened cake on one's birthday, particularly multi-layered frosted ones, as we often see today, was still something of an expensive luxury that only the affluent could afford. It wasn't until the end of the 19th century that ordinary people had sufficient funds, and ingredients were cheap enough thanks to the Industrial Revolution, that the masses began incorporating enriched frosted birthday cakes as part of a birthday celebration. When this happened, the idea of a candled cake and party on one's birthday became nearly ubiquitous in the Western world, as it is today, save for some who still abstain from the practice for religious reasons. One thing you definitely should not be abstaining from is digital identity protection, which I want to tell you about because Dashlane is the sponsor of today's video, and I'm going to do that just before we get into the bonus facts. So Dashlane is absolutely the best way to protect yourself online. It's a one-stop shop for your digital identity protection needs. If all your passwords are the same, bad idea. I know that it's going to be like 80% of people watching, we're going to have the same password for a bunch of stuff. But don't worry about it, because if you use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, everything's going to be much more secure. It's all going to be a lot better and a lot safer, much less chance of your accounts being compromised. Dashlane also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can browse the internet securely and confidently, even on public Wi-Fi. But not just that, they also actively monitor the dark web to see if your information has been leaked somewhere. This means that you can go and change your passwords elsewhere before someone uses that same password and username to go break into your other accounts. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills in all of those annoying boxes for payment information and passwords. Really good stuff. Also, a lot of Dashlane is free, but there are some premium upgrades you can buy if you want more from the service. To see if those are right for you, you can take a 30-day free trial, and after that get a 10% discount using our code TodayIFoundOut at dashlane.com/TodayIFoundOut. There's also a link in the description below. Look, just go protect yourselves, maybe open it up in a new tab right now and check it out once we're done with the bonus facts. And let's get into those bonus facts, shall we? The music to Happy Birthday to You was written down in 1893 by Patty and Mildred J. Hill. Originally, it had different lyrics and it was titled Good Morning to All, and it was sung at the start of the school day. Despite that, they likely copied the tune from somewhere else, and in turn, someone else came up with the modern lyrics a couple of decades later. Up until 2015, the song was actually copyrighted, earning a couple of $1 million annually for Warner Chappell Music, who claimed that they held the copyright. However, finally in 2015, a class action lawsuit against said company was settled for $14 million when Warner Chappell could not actually show that they held the copyright for the song, despite what they'd been charging businesses to use the song, which brought them in about $2 million a year. It appears from this that the song may now be in the public domain, although this isn't quite clear, as it's technically possible another company may come forward to claim copyright on it, though that's probably unlikely. Happy Birthday's previous copyright status is why certain restaurants have their own unique version of the song that they sing to customers on their birthdays. The dropping of the copyright is why you'll sometimes see some of these restaurants using the traditional Happy Birthday song instead of their own one that they made up. And now for another bonus fact. Although there are reports of even older people, the oldest verified person ever was a French woman, Jeanne Calmet, who died on August 4, 1997 at the age of 122 years and 164 days. This is possibly around the oldest any human could live to due to telomeres shortening. In a nutshell, telomeres prevent the strands of DNA from coming undone and also prevent them from accidentally fusing with neighboring chromosomes. The issue is that these end caps get shorter each time the cell divides, owing to the fact that enzymes that duplicate the DNA with a little help from short pieces of RNA cannot do so all the way to the end of a chromosome, so something gets cut off every time a replication occurs. Telomeres ensure that what is cut off isn't critical information. But the result of this shortening each time is that telomeres eventually become too short to provide an adequate buffer. For reference, human cells can only be replicated around 40 to 70 times before the telomeres become too short. This leads to the cell no longer being able to correctly replicate, and there is cell death. So if you took every cell in your body at the time you were born and accounted for all of the cells that they would produce and so on, multiplied that number by the average time it takes for those cells to die, you get what is known as the ultimate Hayflick limit, the maximum number of years that humans can theoretically live. This would be around 120 years, give or take. You can learn much more about this in our video, Can Lobsters Really Not Die of Old Age? So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a like and also subscribe. Please do also check out our fantastic sponsor Dashlane, link below. And as always, thank you for watching.